find it in documents in 40 years' time or 50 years, whatever the figure is, 50 years' time. It'll all come out, but I'll be long in my grave at that time. But I can assure you that they did set up the Provisional IRA.
12 weeks prior to a high-ranking member of the Civil Rights Association, Samuel Dowling, being caught in possession of a gelignite bomb. Less than 14 miles away from Mullaghcrew, County Louth, where Mr. Dowling was arrested, and just across the border into Northern Ireland. 2 Royal Ulster Constabulary officers were killed by a gelignite bomb. This bomb was planted by the Provisional IRA. The young officers were the first Royal Ulster Constabulary officers to be killed by Republicans during the Troubles, and the first security forces to be killed in South Armagh.
Dawn brought Army explosives experts to the scene, and they quickly established that the blast came from a massive 15-pound charge of gelignite wired to go off when the interior light of the car went on. It wasn't until first light that the full impact of the blast became apparent. What was left was hardly recognizable as a car. Dozens of pieces of wreckage were scattered over an area of 100 yards. The car had been in the lane a few yards from the busy main road since Sunday. Army border patrols had passed it several times a day since then.
Worth re-emphasising, and for reasons that will become very clear as this documentary would unfold. On the 11th of August 1970, 2 Royal Ulster Constabulary officers were killed by a booby-trap car bomb. It was planted by the Provisional IRA near Crossmaglen in County Armagh, Northern Ireland. The 2 RUC officers based in Crossmaglen, Samuel Donaldson, aged 23, and Robert Miller, aged 26, went to investigate a red Ford Cortina which had been abandoned on the Lisara Road near the village. The car had been stolen outside the Ardmore Hotel in Newry on the 7th of August. Samuel Donaldson, who was murdered in the bomb, was a relative of Geoffrey Donaldson MP, who at the time of making this documentary, from June 2021 until today's date in 2023, is the current leader of the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland. The Provisional IRA murderers that killed Constable Donaldson and Miller by booby-trapping a Ford Cortina had been made up of people from Navan in County Meath and Inniskeen in County Monaghan. They were under the command of one Sean McStaffin, who was the first Chief of Staff of the Provisional IRA. Now, what we learned in the first part of our documentary was that Mr. McStaffin and a guy called John Kelly, who is completely associated with Captain James Kelly of G2 Military Intelligence. It was Sean McStaffin and John Kelly who originally set up the Provisional IRA in its embryonic form as early as 1968 going forward. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Sean McStaffin, who was involved in the murders of Mr. Donaldson and also Mr. Miller. Sean McStaffin was also working with the Irish State, was associated with John Kelly, who was inextricably linked to Captain James Kelly, to Colonel Michael Heffron, to Charles Hockey, to Neil Blaney, to the Defence Minister of the Irish Republic. That would be one James Gibbons. Now, whenever a Defence Minister is involved in operations across the border in Northern Ireland, is that legal? Is that an act of war? Is that fighting a war by proxy? Is that participating in the murder of citizens of another country? Is that Irish state-sponsored terrorism? And of paramount importance, has the current Irish government got a lot of questions to answer with reference the participation of previous Irish governments in Irish state-sponsored terrorism and the associations that previous Irish governments had with the emerging Provisional IRA from 1968 going forward?